Hello, everyone. My name is Zhenning Liu, the U.S. Chief Economist of CICC. Welcome to our podcast program, CICC Insights. Today, I'm going to talk about the latest development of U.S. monetary policy, as well as the U.S. economy and the labor market prospect going forward. The Federal Reserve just wrapped up its latest FOMC meeting. As widely expected, it held interest rates steady. But here's the real story. The Middle East conflict is now entering its third month. Oil prices remain elevated, and no one sees that changing anytime soon. So the big question here is, will we see any rate cuts at all this year? Let me walk you through what the Fed is actually telling us. Right now, peace talks between the United States and Iran remain stalled. The Strait of Hormuz continues to shut down. That keeps a floor for global oil prices. And for the US economy, that means upside pressure on inflation. Under normal circumstances, the Fed might consider a geopolitical-driven oil spike as a temporary shock and then look it through. But this time is different. This shock is not fading. It is dragging on month after month. In addition to the rising oil prices, the inflationary effects of the early tariffs are still around, making the overall inflation picture complicated. In this case, the Fed has to be cautious, and there's very little room to move. So here's my take on monetary policy. Any near-term rate cuts are unlikely. Unless we see sustained improvement in inflation, there's no reason for the Fed to cut rates. The next cut could be delayed to the fourth quarter, and even that might be optimistic. Here's another layer of drama. This meeting was very likely Jerome Powell's final act as Fed chair. Kevin Walsh is expected to take the position of the chairman of the Fed. Kevin Walsh has pledged to the Congress to uphold the independence of the Fed. But can he really hold the line? Let me offer my reading of where Walsh actually stands on policy. In my view, Walsh is hawkish on Fed's balance sheet policy, but dovish on interest rate policy. He wants to reduce the size of the balance sheet and also wants to reduce the interest rate down the road. On the later part, he did not express it openly during his Senate hearing last week. But his idea that rapid development of artificial intelligence could raise productivity and structurally push down long-term inflation is implicitly suggesting more room to rate cut. But here's the problem. In the short term, oil prices are still elevated, and inflation remains sticky. Even if Walsh believes in disinflationary potential of AI in the future, he cannot change today's inflation trajectory. So even if he takes over, pushing for an immediate rate cut will be very difficult. And here's one more thing to remember. Fed rate decisions are not made by one person. They are committee votes. Without sustained improvement in inflation, the other voting members are unlikely to back a cut, regardless of who sits in the chair. Now, let's turn to the labor market. The April's job report is just days away. On the surface, the labor markets remain solid for months. But beneath the surface, something more complicated is taking shape. Big technology companies are cutting thousands of jobs. Elevated oil prices are squeezing the profit margin across industries. So going forward, what will the US economy look like? I remain cautious about the outlook, and here's why. Artificial intelligence is no longer a future story. It is reducing labor demand across sectors now. Recent surveys also show a growing sense of job insecurity among workers, especially white-collar workers. But at the same time, the administration's tight immigration policies are reducing labor supply. So that is acting as an unusual buffer, preventing the unemployment rate from rising sharply. The result is a strange new equilibrium. Low hiring alongside low firing. On the growth side, the picture remains cautious too. When hiring slows and inflation remains high, real income growth comes under pressure. That could reduce consumer spending. And when consumer spending weakens, the broader economy tells further into what I describe as K-shaped economy. On one side of the K, AI-related capital expenditure remains strong. On the other side, ordinary households are being squeezed. With weaker purchasing power and tightened budgets, there's a growing sense that they are not sharing the benefits of this AI revolution. And here's another problem. The midterm election is approaching in the second half of the year. If the gains from economic growth mostly flow to AI-related sectors, while the majority of households stagnates, that is not only an economic problem, but also a political fault line that will draw attention from policymakers and will have more implications for financial markets in the future. That's all for today's program. Thank you for joining me today. If you are interested in our research, please find them on CICC Research website. This is Zhenning Liu. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.